and welcome to Booklust. I'm Nancy Pearl. My guest today at Folio in downtown Seattle is Jamie Harrison. Jamie, thank you so much for being on the show again.
Thank you for having me.
So, you have a new novel called The Center of Everything. It has a beautiful cover. I loved the cover.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I love it too. It pops.
Yes, it does. It's a very pop sort of cover. So talk about this book a little bit. One of the reasons that I enjoyed it so much is that it's so character driven, and you really feel as though it's not a made up story, that these are real people, and you're getting a glimpse into their lives.
Well, it's the story. I'm glad that you liked it. It is the story of a woman named Polly who lives in a town like my town, Livingston, Montana. She lives in my town. And she's in her 40s, and she's had a head injury. And it sort of unrolls over the course of this couple of weeks in July, during which she's also looking for a friend who's been lost in the Yellowstone River, who's been drowned. And as she helps look for this friend, she is looking back into her past. Her sense of time is somewhat distorted. Her memories are somewhat distorted. Her family's gathered around her to help her. And she is having trouble distinguishing what is true and what is false in her memory.
So in a way, you don't even need a brain injury to have that trouble of distinguishing, to figuring out which of your memories are remembered from photos, for example, or,
Right. Polly's mother sort of challenges her and tells her that she is just remembering photos, that she doesn't have a real memory of this tragedy that happened years and years before to her family. And you're right. And this year, of course, we all have this kind of brain, I believe. Right. But I enjoyed trying to write about memory, about what children really know about life. I really have always felt that you kind of patronize them at your peril. Mm-hmm. That kids, I know when I was 10, I knew a lot more of what was happening in life than my parents realized. Right. Polly, for a section of this book, it's set in 1968, and they're in Long Island, on the Sound, she and her friend Edmund, and I really enjoyed writing from their point of view. Some of it is sort of based on my childhood. When I was a kid, we lived in Stony Brook, Long Island, near the Sound, and I enjoyed trying to get my mind back to that place. Mm-hmm. And then maybe just trying to distort it a little more, as if, I were as damaged as Polly is.
I think that in novels, there's always a tendency to think that the main character is the author, and it's just lightly autobiographical, which I know from my own experience is not the case. In writing a novel is not the case, but you do draw on, it seems to me that you draw on your experiences or experiences you hear about from other people and kind of, twist them a little bit and put them in. Do you think that's the case?
I think it's entirely the case. And I think, some part of us is always a launching pad for what we write about. I know, yes, some part of me is Polly, something occurs to you, you use it all, right. But then you twist it, you synthesize it, and you put somebody in a completely different situation. To some degree, I enjoyed using the parts of it that were my memory. Mm-hmm. For instance, of living at that time. Right. When I was a kid, my father was teaching. My parents were young, like Polly's parents. Mm-hmm. Things were a little out of hand, like their life is in this book. And they also had, my father was teaching at the time at the State University in New York, and he had a mentor who was obviously nothing like the Papa character in the book, the great-grandfather, but was to some degree. I remember all these houses, professors' houses, filled with strange objects and very smart people and books on mythology. And I just loved using that.
Yeah, right. I mean, in a way, it's an homage to history in a way, because you're bringing these characters, bits and pieces of these characters out of your memory and making them live again in a kind of way.
Right. Well, and that's sort of, in a way, what Polly's trying to do. She's
Right.
trying to keep the people she misses, her dead people, with her in the best possible way.
Right. I mean, I was just thinking back, when I was a kid and what I knew when I was 10. And I think what I knew when I was 10 was more the emotional, the emotional context of the family, and not, I mean, I think I would doubt the facts. I mean, I think if I said something, I would doubt, did that really happen? But emotionally, I think my memory of that is really right on.
I agree. I think you can read people pretty well. And I think I knew when my parents were happy, unhappy, when there were problems, when they were out of
Right.
money, when there were stressors. I had a
Right.
crazy grandmother. Boy, if they thought you didn't notice the fact that she was absolutely bats. Um, but yeah, you really do know. I remember being able to I tell when people were fibbing. And there were I had a pretty great childhood. It was maybe bumpy and chaotic. When you have young parents in the
Right.
late 60s,
Right.
it tends to be that way, I think. But a lot of my friends were not so lucky. And
Hmm.
so that's sort of something else I wanted to write about, the kids who sort of get lost
Right.
still,
Yeah.
got lost then in my life,
Like Edmund.
like Edmund.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, when you were writing this, where did the idea, can you identify what the germ of the idea was, or the source for the?
Well, one germ is that I did have this belief when I was very young. We had a family tragedy. My grandfather and my aunt were killed in a car accident when I was 2 or 3, actually, when I was 2. And I remember, like, as you say, knowing the grief the family was going through. I had this idea, I had this belief. I don't know if it was because of angels or Peter Pan or something, that they had become children again and gone off to hide somewhere else, and I was going to find them and
Wow.
save the day. And so when we had to move a few months later, the only explanation I could think of for why we'd be leaving my grandmother and this extended family that was in grief was that maybe I'd be able to find them. We moved to
Wow.
Boston, and I do remember looking for uh, looking for him. And my mother used to tell me that this was complete BS, that I couldn't possibly remember it, but I remember remembering them
Hmm.
and doing that. So there was that. And also, about 20 years ago, my father and I tried writing a screenplay. My father was a writer named Jim Harrison, who was a poet and a novelist, and he wrote screenplays. And for a while, we tried doing them together, and we actually nearly sold a treatment to Steven Spielberg
Wow.
for a story about two children whose parents are archaeologists, and it was sort of a ghost story set in 1968 in Long Island. And then that didn't work, and I put it away. I tried another short story about a young woman named Polly who's cooking in New York in the mid 80s, and sort of played around with that, a sort of seduction story. And that ended up in here. And then, too, I live in Livingston, Montana, and people drown all the time. And I started writing this book this summer, that there was a daily search for somebody in the river. And every time I'd walk out my door, a helicopter would be flying overhead. So basically, yeah, we use our lives,
Right.
and I started twisting it all around.
Did you have a family tree up on a wall or handy? Did you plot out the family tree first?
No, well, so because I smashed everything together, I just
Yeah.
gradually realized, so these kids, one of these kids is going to grow up to be Polly,
Right.
the girl who's going to also bartend and cook in New York and then live in Livingston.
Right.
And I finished a book, my previous book was called The Widow Nash, and I gradually realized that possibly some characters in that book might still be alive for this book. So no, I just kind of suddenly I thought, oh, that's who these people are. It was all kind of odd that way. And then, yeah, there were some logistics, like how old part of the book is centered. Polly is trying to cook a birthday dinner for her great aunt Maud, who is turning, I think I had her be 92. And I had to do the math on that.
Right. Right.
So,
Because if you didn't, some reader would definitely say, "Oh no, this is the wrong," and
right? No, somebody was going to find me. I had to make sure I got this right. So,
put it on Goodreads. Yeah.
I have lots of stickum pads everywhere. I might as well just sort of paste them on my forearms. It's just I need reminders. Yeah.
Your earliest novels were mysteries set in a town that you call Blue Deer, Montana, but is really Livingston. And I remember how much I loved when I read The Edge of the Crazies, which was the first mystery featuring Jules Clement. I remember lending it to a friend, a fellow librarian who it turned out grew up in Livingston, and I didn't know, to me, I mean, I come from Detroit, so I mean, I didn't make the connection that Blue Deer is Livingston. But I remember that he said when he read it, he could follow the characters around in the streets. He just felt like he was home. So.
I love living here, and it's a great. I want to keep writing about it. You can tell all sorts of stories out of one small place. And I loved writing about Jules. I actually, in this book, in the center of everything, there's a character, Polly's cousin, Harry, is really Jules somehow. It just sort of, I missed him and I wanted to put him back in.
Yeah, I hoped that Jules would would show up in this book because there is a sheriff, but it's not the same.
I didn't call it Blue Deer. It's a parallel universe. How's that? So yeah.
Right, and I understand the mysteries have been out of print for a long time, but I understand that your publisher Counterpoint is going to bring them back in print.
Yep, I'm happy about that. Yeah, I'm glad.
I'm thrilled about that. I can't wait because, you're such your novels are so character driven, which I love, and the mysteries are character driven as well. And those are the kinds of mysteries that I really enjoy the most.
Well, I think that, I mean, people make people tick. People make people kill, and being in a small town, this is usually why things happen. It's interrelations and stuff. I'm working on a new one now, and I had forgotten how hard they are to write. And I'm having trouble, but I'm enjoying it. It's just not, it's a hard year to have fun in.
Yes.
I need to get some lightness back and some silliness. And in this one, I'm trying to set part of it earlier when Jules is young and part of it now when he's about 60.
Is what makes it hard. So if we take out what's happening in the world, and this show will air probably in April. So we don't know what's happening with vaccines or anything. We have no idea. But is what's making it hard in the writing coming up with the plot, or the essential mystery? I've never quite understood how to write a mystery.
Well, I'm a little rusty. It's not so much the mystery as finding the liveliness in it. for me right now. I think that's the hard thing about this year. Part of it, I know what I want to do in the mystery. There are always points where you're trying to see if you can pull it off, if you can make it a secret that people care about.
Uh-huh.
I mean, that's the central problem. And so I'm close to the end of a first draft, and I'm going to put it down for a month, and I'll read it. And then I will either knock my head against a wall in despair or think, okay, I can get away with this.
Well, you could send it to me as an early read.
It's way too rough for that. I'm not even giving it to my agent. She asked the other day, and I'm like, oh, I don't know. But yeah, part of it's that, and part of it too is some of it is set when Jules is a little older. I think when I stopped writing them, he'd just fallen in love with somebody. He was in his mid-30s.
Right.
He could misbehave. He could be silly, and it is hard to be silly when a character's 60.
Right.
Somehow, and happily married. There have been not very many mystery novels that have gotten away, or mystery series that have gotten away with happily married couples.
Right.
I'm struggling with this, Nancy.
There is a mystery series where the woman is by Becky Masterman, I think. I think that's her name. Where the main character is a woman in her late 50s, early 60s, who's retired from the FBI, and she's happily married. And they're I loved the first one again very, very, very much.
I remember, I don't know if you ever remember the Vandervalk mysteries. I know they're making them again now. They're different. This iteration on BBC or whatever is pretty different, but Vandervalk was
right
happily married until he wasn't. So there's that. I'll get there.
And and the Louise Penny mysteries, they're happily married.
That's true.
But I think when you're turning 60, or when you're in your 60s, maybe you're spending a lot. It is hard. It's hard. Liveliness might not, be what a lot of people think about.
He might not. It's just harder to put your person in trouble, and he's no longer a police officer. So there's that. Yeah, I'm making him a private eye. And he does archaeology, so that's fun. That part of it is fun.
Why did you decide to jump those 30 years or so?
Well, I couldn't really decide, and I might still give it up and put him back, but I kind of hated to just sort of pick up where he'd left off, and I wanted to write about the world we're in now. To some degree, I wanted to try to take it on. But it's not easy if you're talking about a police officer,
right?
Good or bad. There's that. I guess I just wanted to sort of reflect upon things that I reflect upon now. So to that degree, like you were saying, he's me. And in fact, part of the reason I started writing the series in the beginning is I had a real horror of writing a sort of autobiographical novel about a young woman back when I started, and nobody seemed to understand that Jules was me.
Yeah.
Right? It's a great disguise to write about a male character.
Right.
You can have bar fights, you can have affairs, you can do whatever you want to do.
During this year, last year, 2020, did you get a lot of reading done? What?
I wish I had. I did read a fair number of books, and I wish I could think now what some of my favorites were. I went back to a lot of older books that I'd missed. Like a couple of Louise Erdrich's I hadn't hit before that I just adored, or I read a lot of Peter Carey. I read a book by somebody named, I'm going to get this wrong, Golden Hill, Francis Spooford. I loved.
Right.
Loved that book. I just finished reading, and I will butcher her name. She just won the Nobel, Olga Trucks. Ride Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead. I love that book too.
Yeah.
I'm reading Gil Adamson's new book, Ridge Runner, right now.
Yeah, I'm waiting to get that. I'm really excited about that.
And also a book by Malcolm Brooks called Cloudmaker that Grove is putting out in a couple of months. I'm just a few pages in and really enjoying it.
Wow. I mean, your memory is so good. I mean, I can't believe you pulled those out of the recesses.
Nouns are the first thing to go. I mean, I read a lot off and on. I had trouble getting into some things. At some points of despair, I went back to P.G. Wodehouse
Right.
because he made me happy. I have been watching Prime Suspect again, and I had forgotten how really good that series was. And every great actor in the subsequent 30 years appeared in it too. You're just sort of gaping. So that's Ralph Fiennes. So yeah. So yeah, it's sort of self-soothing. Pride and Prejudice. I rewatched Pride and Prejudice. You know, people are doing that kind of thing.
They are.
I mean, I've just gone back and started reading all these golden age mysteries, you know, all this series of mysteries, particularly British mysteries published in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s. There's a small press called Dean Street Press that's reissuing all of those, or many mysteries by people I had never heard of. And, you know, sort of all contemporaries, the Miss Silver mysteries. Patricia Wentworth is the author, and she was a contemporary of Agatha. Well, she was about the same age as Agatha Christie.
I read some years ago, yeah.
Yeah, that's what everybody says. Oh, I read them years ago, but I had never read them. And really the only way to distinguish Miss Silver from Miss Marple, I think, is that Miss Silver knits in the continental manner. So she can knit and she can, you know, whatever that means. And so she can knit and, you know, still look at the people. But I'm really enjoying those because, I read all 32 of them. I mean, but that's the level of reading.
And
well, yeah, I went back to Dorothy Sayers. I reread some Michael Innes and Nicholas Freeling. I have a basement full of old novels, and I sort of, especially because I was trying to start the series again, looked at what made things work. So that was kind of soothing.
Yes, yeah. When you were a kid, did you read? Were you a big reader as a child?
Yes, absolutely.
Was it mysteries that you were reading or everything?
I read all the Nancy Drews. I actually just unpacked a box of things, and it was that my mother must have held on to, and it was Nancy Drew, The Black Stallion, and a lot of her 40s books, Lada Dog, the Albert Payson Terhune books, a lot of horse books, a lot of dog books, Cherry Ames.
Oh yes, Cherry Ames, Student Nurse. I read all those.
Trying to get the special little cap. Yeah, I read everything. And then I really got into kind of early, even the James Bond books, like when I was 10 or 11. But I probably read more by the time I was 18 than I've read since. I just read everything.
Right. And did you think back then that you wanted to be a writer?
No, I thought it was a very bad way to make a living, and I was a practical kid. My father had trouble making a living until I was about 18. I mean, I paid the power bill a couple of times. And so, no, I thought I would want to be a cook, but then I got an English degree for some reason.
Oh, that's very useful.
And so when I left school, I went to New York and I cooked, and I worked at a place called Dina DeLuca. I did a little catering, and then stopped liking food, so I tried to get a magazine job and eventually did that for a while. And then I moved to Montana, and I got to be an editor for a couple of years for a place called Clark City Press. And I really only started writing because the press went out of business, and we were in Montana. I had a small child, and I didn't want to go back to New York, and so I had to come up with a way to make a living. And so I tried writing mysteries, and it worked for a few years.
Yeah. Do you think that the outer world that we're living in is going to show up in? I mean, you said that in this new book, you want to bring in contemporary, what's happening, you know, in the world. Do you think that there's going to be do you think we're going to see a lot of novels about the pandemic, you know, directly about the pandemic?
I bet we will. I don't feel like doing that. I'm writing about the just before world right now, but I don't know how I'll handle it if I rewrite it.
Right.
I'm sure people will come up with interesting things about the pandemic. I think I'm going to want to not think about the pandemic,
Right. Right.
but
Yeah.
it's hard. Who knows? Who
Yeah.
knows? Yeah. I mean, we already have a lot of great dystopian novels, and boy,
Yeah.
there's a lot of material now. So,
Right. One library I read about did a display of all those dystopian novels and had the heading current events, which I thought was very was very clever.
that is very clever. I'm glad bookstores are doing so well. Some bookstores. I mean, I know a lot of people have had a hard time, but other people are pretty up, and our local independents have done pretty well.
That's great. Yeah. Did you for the center of everything is an audio book as well? Did you get to listen to the read?
I just started listening to the version, and it's a beautiful version. The actress who's done it does a wonderful job.
Yeah,
So
I
that's
thought that.
nice.
Yeah. And would you think they'll do that for the mysteries too? Have them as audiobooks?
I hope so. I hope so.
Me too.
Audio is a fairly big part of the contract now, I think.
Yeah.
I have trouble. You were mentioning that you spend a lot of time listening to books, and I can't do it with fiction. I keep wanting to actually look at the writing. I want to go back and look at something, but I do listen to an awful lot of nonfiction, and I was thrilled to like the voice
Yes.
on
Right.
this. It was great.
Right.
She's wonderful.
I've started listening to The Mill on the Floss, the George Eliot, which I never actually, shamefully, I have to say, which I never read. Yeah, so
I haven't read Mill on the Floss.
yeah,
yet,
it's.
no.
I mean, I didn't even realize that the Floss is a river.
There you go. That I knew, but yeah, it's still, it's funny.
I didn't know.
So what did it mean?
Right.
I love those misunderstandings about books. Yeah.
Right, right. I mean, because when I went with floss, I thought about, well, I didn't think about flossing, that's true, but I thought about embroidery thread for some reason. I don't know why. But anyway, yeah, the reader of an audiobook really makes a big difference. I mean, they can make or break a book.
This is the sort of year I've known a couple of people who've gone back and read Middlemarch or Proust, and I just couldn't quite do it. Other sort of long winters, I usually do read something. I'll pick up a Dickens I haven't read in a long time or something like that. And this year, I have the attention span of a flea.
Yes, yeah.
No.
Well, I'm really grateful for The Center of Everything, which your new novel kept me engaged, which I have had some trouble with, I have to say, during this year. And I adored the characters. I loved Polly. You know, I thought you did a great job. And you know, I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to the reissue of those Jules Clement mysteries.
Okay. Thanks, Nancy, and thank you for having me.
This has been an episode of Book Lust. We've been talking to Jamie Harrison. Her new novel, The Center of Everything, is out from Counterpoint Press. Jamie, once again, thank you so much. It was just a pleasure talking to you and so nice to see you.
Thank you for having me, Nancy.
Bye-bye.